Hi, welcome. It's Michael Makovsky. I'm the president and CEO of JINSA. Welcome to the latest episode of Snapshot. I'm joined as usual by my esteemed colleague, John Hannah, the Randi and Charles Wax Senior Fellow here at JINSA. It's Friday afternoon, August 29th. And John, usually August, is pretty dead in Washington. A lot of people on vacation. There isn't usually a lot of news, but just this week alone, there was plenty of things going on in here. And of course, in Israel and the region, of course, you have the Gaza issue that keeps going. You had the letter from U.S. Ambassador Kushner to Paris. It was a letter in the Wall Street Journal addressed to Macron, basically criticizing him on anti-Semitism, said he needs to address that. You got in here in Washington, you had Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of President Trump, back in the White House with Tony Blair, former UK ambassador, former UK Prime Minister, talking about Gaza. Ron Dermer, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, former JINSA Distinguished Fellow, came in. It wasn't really announced, but he was here for about 24 hours. I guess he addressed the group on the Gaza issue. We could talk about even more things. The UNIFIL was extended. Their mandate was extended in the UN. But let's talk about Syria. We talked about it, I think, last time. It's such an important country. It's such an interesting country, what's been going on there since the fall of Assad. And so much, I think, about what happens in the Middle East. We see manifest itself in Syria. What happens in Syria impacts the Mideast, Israel, Turkey, Jordan, the Gulf countries, Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, everybody. And so let's talk about Syria. There's some Israeli action, some more in Syria. John, tell us what's going on in Syria and why it matters.
Yeah, it was a busy week and kind of a split screen in Syria within the space, I think, of a week or so. You had the second face-to-face meeting between Ron Dermer from Israel and the new Syrian Foreign Minister Shabani under U.S. auspices in Paris, trying to negotiate a new security arrangement between Israel and this new Syria that does something to stabilize the situation, take account of Israel's interests along its border near the Golan to make sure no hostile, especially foreign jihadi terrorist forces that can come near there, to protect the Druze community inside of Syria that suffered that horrible massacre at the hands of Sunni forces, including some government forces, just in July. And because Israel, of course, has a very important Druze constituency of its own, that's an important part of the state and the IDF. And then Israel has worries about Turkey's military role inside of Syria, that it would like some assurances on that Turkey's not going to become a major threat to Israel out of Syria. So you've got that negotiation going on at the one hand, and some positive noises about the possibility, not for peace or Syria joining the Abraham Accords, but for a new security arrangement that would stabilize the situation between the countries. On the other hand, you have some vigorous Israeli military action inside of Syria this week at the same time or just after these negotiations. Little bit unclear exactly what the missions are for these operations, although we're starting to get some information that maybe the Israelis had some intelligence equipment that they'd managed to insert on a hilltop south of Damascus that was part of a former Syrian military base that these new Syrian government had discovered, and Israel took action on the ground and in the air to destroy that. So you've got this kind of, as I said, a split screen of fighting on the one hand by Israel to protect its interests, at the same time trying to negotiate. And of course, as we know in the Middle East, those two things often go hand in hand. We'll have to see how they go. But the only other thing I'd say, Mike, is that this is all happening under the rubric of trying to figure out what's going to be the fate of the post-Assad Syria. Is this country that was sort of a artificial creation of the West, coming out of the French Mandate after World War II, to establish this state of all these different ethnic and sectarian groups that had never cohered together historically, to make them a very centralized state with a strong government that often brutally repressed its people in order to hold it together? Or is Syria going to fall apart into some new form, decentralized, federal, even partition into a bunch of mini states where each of these minority groups, sectarian groups, gets to rule their own mini state? The only thing I'd add, Mike, is that it seems the U.S. government, at least since President Trump's meeting with Shara, the new president of Syria, in May, the U.S. government seems to be backing Shara's desire for a centralized state, while I think the Israeli position has been much more wary of these former jihadists that have gotten control in Damascus, and much more sympathetic to these minorities inside of Syria, particularly the Druze, but also the Kurds and others who, like Israel feels it's a minority in the Middle East in a sea of Arabs, mostly Sunni Arabs, but a lot of hostile Shiites as well. And it has an affinity, a natural alliance, I think it feels, with these minorities. So there's a bit of a tension in the U.S.-Israel vision as well so far, I think, over what is the ultimate future of Syria going to be.
Yeah. And we saw, you want to bring up that the administration, there's some language now in the National Defense Authorization Act on this?
Yes, we've just had some important congressional delegations in Syria meeting with Shara, and now we have bills that are going to be amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act, a must-pass bill in both the House and Senate on a bipartisan basis to completely repeal the sanctions legislation on the books against Syria that were imposed on Syria for the atrocities during the Assad regime and the civil war of the past 13 or 14 years. That there's this bipartisan effort now to repeal them entirely and remove any last vestiges of U.S. leverage over Syria, which may have made sense at some point. I don't think it makes sense in the aftermath of two large-scale massacres by forces aligned with this new government against major minority groups inside of Syria, the Alawites in March and the Druze in July. That if they look like anything, they kind of look like October 7th, 2023 in Israel. So I think it's critical if we ever want to have a stable Syria.
In terms of the brutality and the amount of people killed and...
Yeah, I mean, huge numbers of people killed, people humiliated, beheaded, massacred in large numbers simply because of their religious identity, children, women, old men, just really awful atrocities committed.
So you have like Tom Barak who's the ambassador to... He was ambassador to Turkey, and he seems to be pushing for more of a unified Syria. You have the Israelis who are more cautious and who used to like a strong capital and an address, have seemed to see now value in a weaker Syria. And this will have to play itself out over a bit and what comes out. So, John, it's great to talk to you. We appreciate everyone joining. We're going to be talking about Syria more. It's really a fascinating situation, what's unfolding there, and it has a lot of different directions it could be going. So thank you very much for joining, John. Thank you for joining us. Well, I wish everybody a good holiday weekend.
Great, Mike. Happy Labor Day.
Yeah, thank you.